Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about NBA draft classes. What makes a good draft class and what makes a bad draft class? And more specifically, what is making people say that a certain draft is going to be a bust? It seems that this year that most experts believe that the draft is going to be pretty weak, right? Not only do they believe that it's going to be weak, but they've been speculating this for years, which seems unfair, right? Because how do you know how a 17-year-old skill set's going to develop or even how their body's going to develop? It's also funny when you're speculating for a basketball player that young. It means you're literally watching a high school kid play basketball and saying, hey, this kid sucks. But historically, these scouts do know what they're talking about. So let's get into some of the things that are making these experts believe that this draft class is going to be ass. Well, first of all, can you name any player that's projected to be in the lottery this year? Well, maybe you can if you've been paying attention to the NCAA tournament, but I got a feeling most of you can't. I couldn't until I started doing research for this video. Think about last year. The NBA was so hyped for this draft class that they were televising exhibition games. There were the G League Ignite games and the Metro 92 game. You could watch every Metro 92 game on the NBA app, just so you could keep an eye on Wemby. People were going crazy, you remember? There really aren't any players like that are that exciting this year. None of them really stand out as a #1 pick. Currently, there are 3 guys that are at the top of the list. You've got Alexander Sarr, Ron Holland, and Nikola Topic. There's no definitive #1 that's an overwhelming talent, but somebody's got to go #1. It's giving very 2013 vibes, which for a minute or two looked like it was going to be one of the worst draft classes of all time. This ended up being proven wrong, and we're going to talk about that in a second. If you're not familiar with the draft or you forget, this was the Anthony Bennett draft, where the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Anthony Bennett first overall. I don't want to drill into the disappointing career of Anthony Bennett because I already have in a previous video, and it just seems unnecessary. If you're not familiar with him, just know he was a first overall pick with a very short career in the NBA. So why was Anthony Bennett selected #1 overall then? The same reason as whoever gets selected this year will be selected. Because someone has to go first, and teams are going to look for the player that's most ready to play in the NBA and provide some real value. That's why Bennett was selected. He had size and he had nice touch. The Cavs thought they could bring him in and he could start contributing immediately, which turned out to not be the case. Bennett only averaged 13 minutes a game and he never started. And for contrast, this was the same year that Giannis Antetokounmpo was drafted. Giannis was drafted 15th overall. This seems weird, right? Giannis is a 2-time MVP and a Defensive Player of the Year. How could no one spot his potential? Well, that's just the thing. People considered Giannis a diamond in the rough. Not even a diamond, more like cubic zirconia in the rough. Giannis was 6'9" when he entered the draft, and by the end of his rookie season, he was 6'11". No one could have predicted that. Giannis wasn't even in consideration for the #1 pick. He was coming from the Greek league, and he wasn't a particularly skilled player, nor did he really understand the game that well. But Giannis did have a solid rookie season, and he was second team all-rookie. But 4 years after, he was an all-star, and he was averaging 22 points a game and 9 rebounds. And I believe one of the biggest reflections of that was his stature change. Giannis was low-key skinny when he entered the league. By 2017, he looked like this. My point is, sometimes these drafts look bad, but that doesn't mean that these players aren't going to pan out in the long run. It just means they're not going to come in the league and totally ball out like Paolo Banchero or something. Rudy Gobert was also in the 2013 draft, and it took him 4 years to make an all-defensive team. He's another guy that filled out too. Dude, this guy is jacked, man. You can't project that far into the future. It's possible that the next Giannis is in this draft class. This is a good draft though if your team has a lower pick, because you're not really missing out on any once-in-a-lifetime prospect. You can have pick 10 or 11, maybe get a guy like Donovan Clingan. Maybe. His stock obviously has gone up since the NCAA tournament where he won. Him and UConn, not him individually. And this is an aspect I really want to call out though. I remember in 2011, Derek Williams had a huge dunk during the NCAA tournament. His dunk went viral and he became one of the top picks. Granted, he was always projected to be in the lottery, but he went #2 overall. That dunk shot him up a ton. There were even ESPN people talking about him going above Kyrie, who went #1 overall, with the argument that Kyrie had only played 11 games that year. Scouts get bricked up during this tournament, and a player's performance can drastically affect where he falls in the draft. A lot of you probably don't even remember Derek Williams, but he had a solid career and he should definitely be proud of himself. But back to Clingan. A team with a lower pick can snag Clingan. Scouts are saying he doesn't have a terribly high ceiling, but he's ready to come in the league and be a rim protector. He can get up and down the floor and he can defend the pick and roll. And he's 7 feet tall. He's like a 7'6" wingspan. He reminds me a bit of Walker Kessler. He can be a center right now, so that's valuable to a lot of teams. If you're a college basketball fan, you might be wondering, what about Zach Edey from Purdue? Why isn't he being projected as #1 overall? This dude rules. This year and last year, he was the Collegiate Player of the Year. He took the Boilermakers to the finals and scored 37 points in the championship game. Seems weird that some mock drafts even have him going as low as the 2nd round. What's going on here? It's because Edey plays with his back to the basket. His offensive game is almost entirely based on him backing dudes down. This is his cheat code. He puts his butt into his defender, he backs them down, he gets a field goal. It's his bread and butter. The problem is, when he gets to the NBA, he's going to be putting that butt into Rudy Gobert and Joel Embiid. That's not going to work, his butt's not big enough. Edey plays like Shaq, and he's entering a league where that's kind of been extinct for about 10 years. The guy has potential, but right now he's very very one-dimensional on offense. So from my research, it seems as though that Alex Sarr is going to be the #1 pick, who's a French player playing in the NBL right now. That's in Australia. It's where Lamelo Ball played before he got drafted. He's another center like Klingon and Edey. The reason teams like him though is he has the skill set of both Klingon and Edey, but he can guard ball handlers, and he's shown a little bit of promise of being able to shoot a three-pointer, which is very important in the NBA now. I think another big part of this is he's been playing pro basketball for a long time now. He was playing in the OTE league when he was 16 years old. Now, as an 18-year-old, he's playing in the NBL with grown men and putting up grown men numbers. But even for him, his draft comparison is Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, don't get me wrong, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a really good player. But if your benchmark for a #1 pick's potential this year is Jaren Jackson Jr., that's a weak sauce draft. I'm sorry. This is the type of year where teams actually like owning other teams' protected picks. They don't mind if the team whose pick they have falls into the protected range, because in most cases, if it did, the pick would fall to the following year, which is going to be a pretty good draft. I heard Bill Simmons comparing Cooper Flagg to KG. I guess he was watching his high school game. He said he's a better high school prospect than Zion Williamson. So this year, the Nets don't have their own draft pick. The Rockets have. The Brooklyn Nets aren't very good, so the Rockets are going to get a pretty high draft pick. The Brooklyn Nets don't really care though, because this draft isn't that great. They got lucky. This is a major factor when it comes to teams trading away their future picks. If a team is offering another team a first-round pick for a player like, I don't know, Alex Caruso, there are going to be 3 factors that determine the value of that pick. The first one is the pick protected? I'm going to tell you what a protected pick is. A protected pick is when the lottery happens, if that pick falls into a certain range, the team trading the pick gets to keep it. It's just a way to cover their asses in case that pick gets really valuable. Maybe it falls into 1 through 4. But if it falls in that range, typically the pick falls to the next year, and eventually it becomes unprotected. Another factor in trading a pick is, are you receiving a pick from a team that is good? Because that's a bad thing. You want a pick from a team that's bad. If the Boston Celtics trade a pick in the next few years, that pick is not going to be a good pick. That pick is going to be so bad it might as well be in the 2nd round. If the Celtics are the best team in the league, their first-round pick is going to be the 30th pick. But on the other hand, if the Wizards trade you a pick, it's entirely possible that that pick is going to be the #1 pick overall, since the Wizards' terrible record will guarantee them high lottery odds. And then the last factor is the draft that this pick is from good? Being that scouts didn't believe that the draft this year was going to be very good, we got a pretty weak trade deadline. Nobody was really trading away their first-round picks because no one really wanted it. Teams wanted players, they were ready to give away that first-round pick, but things just stayed stale. Even bad teams were like, no thanks, we'll just keep Nick Claxton to ourselves. Another interesting aspect of timing for the draft is Bronny James, who just declared for the draft. I said a few weeks ago that Bronny is not ready for the NBA, but he is now declared and he's able to be selected. Seeing that this year's draft isn't so hot, I think someone's going to say, it and take him. They're probably going to take him in the 2nd round, but they might get aggressive and take him in the 1st round. I don't know. But even in a bad draft, why would a team take a player who's unproven? Well, it's because it's their ticket to sign LeBron James. LeBron has a player option this year with the Lakers, so he's free to leave. Some team is going to sign Bronny James to hopefully incentivize LeBron to come over and join their team, so he can play with his son, something that he's always wanted to do, and he said he wants to do that. If the draft was more stacked this year, it probably wouldn't happen. People wouldn't want to risk wasting their pick. Personally, I'm hoping he doesn't get drafted for his own sake. He's not hiring an agent this year, so he can go back to the NCAA, which is what I'd like to see. Take LeBron James out of it, and he's just a basketball player trying to start his career in the best way he can. He shouldn't feel any outside pressure to join the NBA at any point in time. He should join the NBA when he's ready, and he can contribute. I don't know if that's next year. I don't know if he goes to college for 4 more years. All I know is it's not this year, man. My favorite draft in recent years was the 2018 draft, even though it was kind of overshadowed by the 2019 draft, which had Zion Williamson in it. Zion was such a big prospect that people weren't even really thinking about the 2018 draft. They were so excited by this kid in South Carolina that could dunk really hard. But it's not out of the question that the 2018 draft could be one of the best draft classes of all time. The players in the draft are still young, but have made a huge impact on the league. You've got Luka, who's 25 and is already a guaranteed Hall of Famer. If you think that's crazy, it's not. I've explained why I believe that in a few of my other videos. Go check those out if you want to, or just do your own research. Then you got Shea, who's about to get his 2nd first-team All-NBA selection. You got Jaren Jackson Jr., who's been a Defensive Player of the Year, and Trae Young, who's led the league in total assists and total points in 1 year, as well as Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, and DeAndre Ayton. Ayton's good, he's not great, but come on. My point being, you can speculate and you can try to predict the future, but when it comes to the development of young athletes, no one has a crystal ball. Alright, thank you for being here. Thanks for watching the whole video. If I missed something or you didn't like something I said, leave a comment. I always reply. Like the video if you liked it. Dislike the video if you did not enjoy it. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.